I'd just like to start by acknowledging and passing on our condolences to both John and to Sally for the loss of loved ones, and for all those people who have lost people close to them. So I'd just like to make that acknowledgement to you both, and thinking of you. So having said that, I'll now to ask if there are any apologies, and there being none, there is no public forum. So are there any items not on the agenda? There being none, then are there any conflicts of interest? There being none, then we'll move straight on to the first item of business, and I don't expect that the meeting is going to be as long as what the agenda suggests with the volume of papers that we've had to read. So I'll just firstly go to 1.5 minutes for confirmation and the resolution for that the Thames-Coromandel District Council confirms the Thames-Coromandel District Council minutes for the meeting held on the 7th of December 2021 and the minutes for the extraordinary meeting held on the 9th of December 2021. Do I have a mover? Sally, do I have a seconder? Gary, any discussion? There being none, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? None, so therefore the motion is carried. We'll go on to the next item of business, which is the options for control of freedom camping. And we've got Sian Smith speaking to this. So are there any matters you wanted to raise, Sian? Hope I've said that right. Is that Leslie as well? Could I have volume from the chamber, please? So I'm not, Ariana, I'm not hearing anything from the chamber. Can I please have some volume?
Can you hear us now?
I am. I thought you were awfully quiet this morning. I thought it was great. Look how I didn't notice much difference. So sorry about that. Sian.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So yeah, I hope that the report is reasonably self-explanatory. We discovered during the course of the work that we were doing on the review of the previous freedom camping bylaw, when we looked back to just get our ducks in a row when we were preparing to do our next report on that review, that unfortunately when the bylaw was made in 2014, it was made as a new bylaw and therefore had to be reviewed within 5 years. Unfortunately, we were just outside that date in starting the review, and it means we now have to basically start again. However, as noted in the report, all the work that was done on that review, including the input that we received from our communities through the submissions that were made in that process, has not gone to waste. We will be able to use that information to help us develop a new bylaw, which is what we're proposing to do now. And there's a very brief outline of the potential timeline for that in there. I should also note, as is recorded in the paper, the government announced at the end of last year quite substantial amendments are going to be made to the Freedom Camping Act 2011 during the course of this calendar year. The bill has not yet been introduced to Parliament, so we don't 100% know what the details of that are, but it appears likely that the government is going to set a rule to apply across the board around the country that all freedom camping in a vehicle must be in a vehicle that meets a self-containment standard, and that standard will also be further prescribed in detail in the central government legislation. So we do have that which we'll keep an eye on throughout the course of the year, and of course as and when we are reporting back to elected members on the progress of the development of our own new bylaw, will also feed into that any new information that comes in from central government about those amendments to the Act. So we'll sort of keep track of it as we go. Nevertheless, it's still our recommendation that we should make a new bylaw. The new bylaw will not be made redundant when this legislation change happens at central government. The bylaw will still be enforced. Maybe it might need a few tweaks, but we'll come to that when that happens, the town's fair down the track. I'm happy to answer any questions, obviously through the chair.
Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, just a quick one. Yeah, just to support what we're trying to do. I think it's important now to hear the government's actions and then put it together. So it's a good time to do it. So, yep, all good.
Good on you. Thank you, Kerry. Murray?
The timing of this will be the new bylaw coming next year.
This year, before the next summer.
I'm just not quite sure when you said the government is going to make an announcement this year, before the end of the calendar year.
The government made an announcement last year at the end.
Yes, I know. But you're not actually quite sure the government are going to put a name.
No, not at this stage. We haven't, they have proposals, but no bill has actually been introduced.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about the timing of trying to get this in this year without knowing how governments flip-flop and chop and change. Whether we're just putting the cart before the horse a little bit, I just don't know.
My view is that we're not, that because the government in its announcements, and yes, I take your point, that just because they've announced one thing doesn't necessarily mean that was what's going to end up in the legislation. We won't know until that happens. But they said it won't affect our.
Sorry, but I'm very mindful on the first bill that was put up, the 2011 Act. In the last reading, the government did a complete flip-flop.
Yes, and that's likely.
And that's probably one of the comments.
Yes, and that's fair.
So, Sian, for us to be covered though, right now, do we have an operational bylaw?
No, we do not. No.
So I think it's really important that we do actually begin this process and put something in place. My understanding is that they're looking for self-contained vehicles to have a properly separate toilet cubicle within the vehicle. But again, that's just hearsay. So we're not sure what will come through. But I certainly support the fact that we do need to have something in place. And so I'm happy to move the resolution accordingly. Do I have a seconder?
Yeah, happy to second it.
So,
thank you.
So the resolution has got, you're just moving 1, 3 and 4.
1, 2, 3 and 4.
Oh, sorry, yes. Sorry, yes.
So, okay, so any further discussion? It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, Sian and Leslie.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Your Worship.
So we're now on to item 2.2, Matarangi Open Space. And what I intend to do, so I see John has a question. So I'll just outline it and then I'll go to John. What I was intending to do was go through the resolutions one at a time, almost line by line, so that we can do it quite carefully and everybody, it's quite thorough. But firstly, I'll just go to you, John.
Yes, I was going to move that we open it for discussion. Thanks, Your Worship. And if I could just speak to it, that would be fine.
Certainly.
I went over to Matarangi with a group of other councillors and looked at the open space over there, and I was impressed. It's beautiful open space, and there's no two ways about it. The gentlemen that are behind Matarangi Land Holdings are passionate and they have the community's interests at their heart. So I walked away from there, yeah, with an open mind, but leaning towards the purchase of that for various reasons. But then reality set in, and I compared it to myself on a personal basis, going to the Chrysler car lot up in Auckland and wanting to buy the latest model Chrysler, nothing like my Chrysler, and I can't do that because it would be fiscally irresponsible to do that on a personal basis. I would rather spend my money on my family or other items. So I see the Matarangi open space in the same light. I see the benefits of having that open space, but I see no obligation on council to purchase that land. There is no legal obligation for us to purchase it. It is a want and not a need. That land can still be protected by covenants by Matarangi land holdings. This council would purchase that property with its reserves and have very little impact on the rates. But I just reinforce to you that we do have some decrepit infrastructure, and if we're going to be spending that money, that's ratepayers' money that we're responsible for. then we need to be very careful what we spend it on. And I'm pleased this meeting is an open forum so that ratepayers can actually hear how each councillor feels and how they vote. Because what you do today will set a bit of a tone for the next council as well. You're all good councillors. I know some of you are not standing again, but a number of you are, and you are good councillors. I would like to start addressing the fiscal responsibility that we carry today to carry on into the next council. So yes, you can go ahead and you can purchase that land, very little rate impact, especially on the district. It will involve their reserves. The Whitianga ratepayers are going to carry a lot of the liability and the fiscal costs that go with it. I accept that, and I'm very realistic my nose to another board's business, but I do feel I have a responsibility to those ratepayers as well. So what I'm saying to you guys is just think about it. Think about how you're spending your money. Think about the best use of it. Think what your ratepayers are thinking. And on that basis, I would like to put a resolution on the floor. That resolution is, for the reasons I have outlined, do not proceed with the investigation into purchasing the Matarangi Open Space area. That's number one. Number two, just to make it perfectly clear, do not purchase the Matarangi Open Space. So that's a resolution I'm putting out there for the reasons I've outlined. I hope I haven't spoken to anybody, I haven't lobbied anybody, but I hope you listen to what I say. It is going to set a bit of direction for council now and in the future.
So,
You can
sorry.
see,
No, I want a point of order.
Oh, is it a point of order, Murray? Point of order, Murray.
And the point of order is this, that we have got a suggested resolution, which I don't think has been received and discussed yet. We now have another resolution. Is this the second resolution? Is this a notice of motion? Is what is going to come through?
no, it's not a notice of motion.
If this is lost, are we going to take the first resolution, or you as chair, are you going to accept this resolution or not? I'm just wondering from a chairmanship point of view, how you're going to handle it.
Okay, so if this motion gets a seconder, well, if this proposal or motion gets a seconder, then the matter is up for discussion, has to be dealt with before the next resolution is put.
Okay.
I'm sure that's the proper process of a meeting, as I understand it. Can someone please correct me if I'm wrong?
Well, I would have thought that.
So I'm not wrong, and so therefore, what are you speaking to, Tony?
The same thing. So we have a resolution of this council
So yours is a point of order?
to put this matter
Is this a
into a
point of order,
long-term
Tony?
plan.
Tony, is this a point of order?
No, I was just going to speak to what the discussion is here now.
The point of order.
Oh, you got a second.
No, I'm not saying.
So I'm sorry, what's going on there? So there's a bit of byproduct. Tony was speaking to a point of order.
Martin has his hand up, Sandra.
Yeah, but Tony had finished speaking, has he? Okay,
Well,
that's right,
I also
Martin.
don't understand. The last time this thing came up, the same process happened. John started into it long before we heard from the author of the report. And all I'm saying is we have a resolution that we accept this to go to the long-term plan. We've gone back and revisited it. This thing here is now doing the same thing again for the decision to be made as part of the long-term plan consultation. So I think this is out of order, and it's the second time it's been hijacked.
Martin?
Yeah, well, I mean, you as chair either decide that John's able to put this resolution and whether he gets a seconder and so whether we discuss it or not.
That's right. So therefore, for the purposes of discussion and to put it to bed, I will second the motion. We now put it up for discussion. We deal with this resolution and then move on to what's on the order paper. So is there any discussion in regard to John's resolution, which is to not proceed and to not purchase the open space? Is there any discussion in regard to that? Okay, Murray, Tony, then Sally.
This matter has been canvassed for a numerous number of times. It has gone on for a number of years. I think it is very shallow to hijack here, and it's obviously been sorted out beforehand, that this motion then gets canned without any discussion. We've been through a workshop, we've sorted out, we've spent hours and hours and hours of councillors' time, of staff time. The staff time goes back almost 20 years. We have an opportunity to deal with it and put this forward, because this is going to consultation. This is not making an actual decision. This is going to prove to be consulted as part of the annual plan. So what we're actually doing, and I stress to council, we're not saying anything more than it goes to the annual plan and this. And you know, I think to make comments like it's a want, not a need, are actually very shallow comments. We all have an obligation around this council to look at the fiscal responsibility. And I think there's nothing that evidences that more than climate change, because the debate we're having on climate change is not about climate change per se, it's about fiscal responsibility. And let's not forget that argument. So in this one, I ask councillors not to forget, and I see the councillors shaking their head about climate change, and let me say, Robin, that we all agree with climate change and we've got to do something. And I totally agree with that. And my only thing on climate change is the fiscal responsibility of council. And I'm pleased to accept that. So we may vary on that, but it is fiscal responsibility. And I think to say that we are being fiscally responsible by taking it to the annual plan. We are being fiscally responsible because I look at this and the proposal put forward, and I said to someone the other day, is a proposal that all the parties will not like. I don't think Mercury Bay particularly likes using up most of their retained earnings. I don't think any of the councillors like taking the property, some of the property reserves that have been there, and I understand for a long time and never been used, but it's still something we look at. I don't think Matarangi particularly likes having to raise a certain amount of money, and if they don't raise that money, this is all dead and buried. So we've come to an agreement there, and if we don't sort this out, councillors, it will cost a lot of money because it will incur legal fees, and that will cost this council a lot more. So I just leave it there.
Tony, and then Sally.
Well, I just go back to, I did say, this, and what Rose said, this has been canvassed for over 10 years that I know about. And in our long-term plan from the last round, we agreed to go through that process. And a number of attempts to hijack it, we get to this stage to say, no decisions here, goes into the long-term plan, gets consulted, and then we make a decision. So I think there's been 2 attempts to, from the last time I was appalled, because I was the author of it, didn't get a word to speak to his own work. So for my part, you can be assured I will not be supporting the resolution that's just been put in front of us.
Thank you, Tony. Sally.
I won't be either. And for me, it's really important that this gets sorted. We are close to it. The amount of money involved in terms of infrastructure is small compared to what my kids and grandkids can potentially have in land and protected as a reserve. So to me, the infrastructure argument and the fiscal responsibility doesn't hold water enough in this case. So I will be voting for this to go into the annual plan for consultation and then go from there.
Thank you. Gary, I'm just going around the room now.
Well, no, I prefer to go back to what the agenda is, and I certainly won't be supporting John's resolution.
Thank you. Martin?
Yeah, just wanted to echo Sally's thoughts, and ultimately it's up for discussion as far as which of the various council funds are used. I personally wouldn't like to see the special projects reserve be used for that, because I've got some other plans on how to spend that. So yes, it'll be a hit on Mercury Bay for their retained earnings, but we do have a property fund, and the clues in the name, so I think that should be used along with Mercury Bay retained earnings. But yeah, I can't support John's proposal.
Thank you, Martin. Robin?
I really support
Tony and Murray in this one, actually, that this needs to be put to bed and we need to go back to the original resolutions and hear what the author of the report has to say before we can vote.
Thank you, Robin. Terry?
Yeah, I'm along those lines as well. We've got skin in the game here. We've got some assets on the property. We've talked it through pretty long and hard, and the options that we're putting forward really are options, and we need some other buyers in, like the community, to make it happen. So I'm not voting for that motion that's been put on the books.
Thank you, Terry. So, John, you can have the last word.
I believe, since we're going points in order and things, Your Worship, that I have the right to reply to some of the issues, some of the things that were raised. I may have changed their minds yet.
You won't. Good luck with that.
Never say die. Okay, so may I just finish off then and speak a couple of the matters that were raised around the table, Your Worship? Thank you. First of all, shallow I am not. This has always been my stance, my point of view. The fact that I went to Matarangi and took the time to look and actually left there really thinking about the possibilities, I would like to show that I am not shallow. That's always, the resolution today reflects what's always been my point of view. By dealing with the matter today and killing it, I heard Murray talk about further costs down the line, if we proceed with it. By dealing with it today, we avoid any further costs by going through an investigation process. It ends it. Legal fees have been used time and time again to scare councillors, the cost of litigation. So be it. Let's see what transpires on that one. It doesn't worry me at all. As far as Sally's point about the amount of money being small that's required for this, yes, $1 million for this council is probably, small. To me, it's big. To your ratepayers, it's big, but the council is probably small. What is important here today is how we are seen to be spending those dollars. That's what's important, and it will set a tone, I believe, for this council to follow for the small amount of time it's got left, and for the next council that we address our infrastructure instead of buying things that we don't actually need. And that's the end of my speech.
Thank you, John. And I would have preferred to have this discussion actually as we went through the motion or the recommendations on the order paper. However, it's come out of the process, and so I've supported the discussion, so the resolution for discussion purposes. I'm going to support John while still preferring the next consideration of the next recommendations. So I just put that out there. So I'm going to put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
What resolution? John?
Good on you, John. All those against? Thank you. So the motion is lost. We'll now go to the motion on the order paper, the recommendations on the order paper. So thank you, everybody. I think it's important to let the discussion roll. So firstly, as I said before, we're going to take it piece by piece. So do I have a mover and seconder? So for the receiving of the report.
I'll move.
Second.
All those in that's just a receiving of the report. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against, carried. Item 2, mover and a seconder, please. Heads of agreement. Receives the heads of agreement. Do I have a mover?
Let's do that.
Pardon?
Is there any reason to have to do that? We've moved to receive the report.
Resolution,
Therefore, everything
I only put up number 1, Tony. The mover and the seconder was for number 1 to receive the Matarangi Open Space report. I said to you I'd be taking it line by line. So now we're on to recommendation 2.
I'll second it.
Thank you. And that's about receiving the heads of agreement. So is everybody's clear on that? Is there any discussion? There being none, I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against, carried. Suggested resolution 3 approves the matter be consulted as part of the annual plan. And I think and I'm going to take that part by part because there are some things that need to be raised. And resolution 3 is quite substantive. So I'm going to raise, has anybody got any queries they want to raise about resolution 3 before I do? Martin?
Yeah, just so under subsection 1, subsection number 5.
Yes. Under section 2 of 3, where it talks about the council's preferred option, it makes no mention in there of the property reserve fund. So I know all those details have to be worked out, but I would like council's preferred option to specify the property reserves fund in there instead of the special projects reserve. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Martin? I mean, sorry, Murray.
I said before we received that, I'd like to ask of Donna why that particular reserve, because I have no doubt that the finance people within this council have gone and looked at this, and there must be a reason.
Yeah. Is Donna here? Hayden is.
Or Hayden.
Like Hayden.
Come closer to the microphone.
Through the chair, we,
Come closer to the microphone.
Thank you, Hayden.
through the chair, we felt that that was the best, most appropriate fund to use. Yes, you could use the property reserve fund as well, but we felt that special projects one was the best one to use.
So,
Your Worship, could I just point out, and also just follow up on what Hayden just said, that the rationale is included in the comprehensive report, and it mainly was around, from my discussion with Donna, it was around the fact that the two reserves referred to are historic reserves that have not been added to on an annual basis. They've sat with the current balance for a considerable number of years, and that it would be appropriate to use those so that those reserves are then extinguished, if you like, and are no longer on the books. So I think the recommendation from Donna certainly was along those lines, as opposed to using the property reserve. But as Hayden says, there's definitely flexibility around that, and that's a matter for council to decide in terms of which fund is actually used for the district share of the cost.
can I ask a question about that point?
Yes, go Sally.
So Martin's put up one idea is, so potentially when this goes to the annual plan round, somebody like the Thames Community Board, for example, could submit on that and it get processed and dealt with there rather than us ad hocing here, because I'm just wanting it to go through a process that makes sense. So I'm just checking that different aspects of this council could submit with another idea and that would be considered. I just wonder if that's a possibility, Martin.
Yeah, that is a possibility out of consultation process for council to determine an alternate source of the fund.
Yeah.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I'm wrong. Terry?
Yes, I'd just like to look at point 5. The
Can we
$1
just
million that the Matarangi targeted rate looking at, and the 1.25 million that the council's paying. We did have a discussion around this, that there was an approach to try and negotiate this deal for around $1 million. Has that discussion been had? It has been had. So just flagging that.
Can I raise an issue here? Could you put that just on hold momentarily, Terry, because I have another query around that. Firstly, I see that the monies from the district fund has increased by 248,000, because I understood that the district contribution out of the retained earnings was only going to be 500,000 out of the special general purpose reserve or the property reserve.
Your Worship, perhaps I can answer that. In the report, there's a table there that sets out the funding options, and in that,
Radio.
Within that table, it has two amounts. One is if we purchased it for 1 million, the other is if we purchased it for 1.25.
Yeah.
Under the 1 million column, the district reserve funds required would have been the 500,000. Under the 1.25 million cost, then that increases by that 250, so it becomes 750,000.
Okay, so I just want to make a simple clarification here. So, and this still leads to Terry's point. So we've got stormwater infrastructure on the golf course, which is holes 3 to 7 or 3 to 9, 3 to 7. Anyway, use of that land for our infrastructure has been by way of an easement, which has worked perfectly well for a number of years. So we're now being asked to buy that land, and it's going to be covenanted, and so it will only be used solely for reserve open space purposes. So having said that, and we'll be offering, it'll be going back at a peppercorn rental for use for the golf club purposes. So the price that's being asked is 1.25. In the normal course of what we're required to do, we would be getting a valuation. Instead, we're being asked for a price rather than determining the purchase on a valuation. So I'm just, are we acting in accordance with proper procedure in not going for the requirement valuation in terms of purchasing the property? I'm just, that's a bit of a concern I have, and then we come back to that leads into the discussion around the price, around 1 million or 1.25. What is our obligation to be acting fiscally responsibly by doing a valuation?
Through the chair, I think I'll answer that with, we're suggesting at the moment a public consultation exercise. I would recommend to council that prior to any final decisions being made, a valuation should perhaps be prepared for your information, but I don't see that as an imperative issue at this point in time, as you're just trying to get something into an
Yeah, can I just
3 times more?
Right, Terry?
So you might find out you have to 3 times.
consultation, you don't know how property prices are going to fluctuate. So before you make a decision on any purchase, I would suggest that would be a prudent thing to do.
I agree.
At this point in time, it's about whether it goes into an annual plan or not.
Agreed.
So, Terry?
Yeah, so just to answer my question, Alan, so what you're asking, what I'm asking you, do you feel that this formula at the moment is the most palatable formula that's going to make this thing work?
Through your worship, so the discussion that I have held discussions directly with the both the community groups and the current landowners collectively, but I've also had separate one-to-one discussions with the landowners without the community groups there, and have raised that question with them in terms of the value. The response from the landowners is quite clear, is that if the 1.25 is not able to be achieved, then they would need to revert back to their shareholders, and there's 21 shareholders in that company. They would need to revert back to them to get their perspective on whether a lower figure would be acceptable or not. They've said quite firmly to me that the 1.25 figure is a firm figure, if you like, from the company's perspective.
Right. Thank you.
So I think that we need to ensure that our obligations, procedural obligations, are ticked off tidily in considering evaluation, because I don't want to get hung, drawn and quartered by meeting a demand price rather than taking a responsible approach with ratepayers' money. So that would be my only concern. So otherwise, that's why I took this in part, so that we could have a time to discuss that aspect of the resolution within number 3. And so, having said that, how do we deal with the valuation aspect, Rob, going forward? John?
Your worship, what you've said just makes total sense to me. While I don't support this in any way, shape, or form, I made that quite clear. It is important that we protect council's interests and that property be valued fairly. And as you say, not sold at a demand price. So I myself would like to see that noted somehow, even at this early stage in the resolution. We need to be procedurally correct. We need to look up the interests of our ratepayers. Evaluation is the best way to do that. So that should be noted.
Well, whether the valuation's the best, to me, that's advice that we get from the chief executive at the time after the community consultation and pre the delegated responsibility of the CE to sign off this final agreement. So that's how I understand that would be covered.
Again, through the chair, once we reach the end of the community consultation process, the councillors will have the opportunity for a time called deliberations. Once we get to that deliberations phase, that would be the appropriate time for evaluations to be thrown into the room for consideration, because councils make many decisions, not purely financially based, but quadruple bottom line based. So I would suggest that would be the appropriate time to weigh up valuations against social goods, against economic goods, etc. So that would be the appropriate time.
Great.
Okay, well, I'm happy with that if it's, we note that within the resolution. Murray.
Your worship, to appease John's worries, and clause 4, you could put there that it's subject to valuation at the time of deliberation, and that way you could cover it easily.
Yeah, you can just include valuations at time of deliberation. I mean, Sally and Rob are quite right about just making sure that we've tidied, that we're clear on our responsibilities in that regard, and I think that's, as long as all that's done, then that's fine. That's just a consequence of having to do that in other property matters. So that was something that I wanted to raise here today. So I think that's a good point, Murray. Include a deliberation process to also include valuations at the end of that resolution. So that means, having had the robust discussion on point 3, so and 2 matters, concerns that were raised by Terry and Martin. Terry and Martin, are you happy that your concerns will be addressed through the final deliberations of the consultation process? Martin,
Yes.
You happy with that?
Terry? Well, yeah, I think in that point, I think in that point too, though, I would still like to see the property fund being mentioned as one of the options. The only other thing I just want to check, in point 2 above that, talks about the proposal for a targeted rate to fund the community share of the land purchase and operating costs has been removed, but that, as far as I understand, that doesn't remove entirely the idea that some of the 1.25 million may in fact be achieved by rates, as mentioned in some of the options further down. I'm pretty sure that's right, isn't it? It's just the community fundraising bit. Yeah, correct. Right. Fundraising. Okay. Yep. Yeah.
Right. You happy with that, Martin? Yep. Okay. Terry?
Yep.
You're all good? So therefore we just add, so we can move, we now have a mover. Do we have a mover and a seconder for item 3, resolution 3? We had that, did we? That was, okay, looks like Terry and Murray. So any further discussion on resolution 3? There being none, then I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? So that's carried. So now notes and requests, and so we'll move items. The decision be made available. Okay. So item 6 is no longer necessary, is it, Ariana?
That's correct. Clause 6 is not necessary.
So therefore we're only moving items 4 and 5. Do I have a mover?
Yes.
Your worship, to interrupt, but I just note that probably number 4 is probably the appropriate place for the requirement for evaluation to be noted.
Yeah.
So I think that was taken before we add in the evaluation be provided prior to annual plan deliberations.
Okay, yeah, I was going and deliberation process to include valuation. That can go on the end.
About 4 million.
That's fine. So that's the addition to item 4. So we're only moving recommendations 4 and 5. We have a mover. Who was that now? It's Murray. And who was the seconder?
Happy to second it. Yep.
Terry, any further discussion on items 4 and 5? There being none, then I'll put the resolution with that amendment. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. So recommendation 6 is no longer necessary. John, I noted your hand up, so thank you. So that concludes the Matarangi discussion. And so we now move on to public excluded. Do I have a mover?
Yep.
Sally, seconded Robin. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. So we'll move on to item 4.1, Tairua Skatepark. Do I have a mover?
I'm happy to move.
Move Terry, seconded John. Any discussion on the resolution? Oh, sorry, Robin.
Oh, thanks, Sandra. I just wanted to thank the Adele and Chase for such a comprehensive report. Although it did take me several hours to go through, I recognise that it must have meant that it took 10 times that to actually put together, and I really appreciated having all that information. There are a couple of things there that really support what I think is, resolution 3 to use Corey Park as a preferred site. Firstly, being that the skate park decision needs to be consistent with other decisions within council, including the shoreline management plan. So those maps are pretty comprehensive in my view. And that the other thing that I really appreciated was that neither iwi involved in Tairua Pauanui want the skate park on the shoreline. And so those two were the clinchers for me. So I'm really happy to support that resolution as it stands.
And any other comment? I'll put just echo our thanks to you, Adele and to Viros, and for an excellent process. And, we're really appreciative of that. So I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you. We now move on to item 5.1. And that is the Waikato Waikato LAS basically. It's a big resolution and it's to basically include Waikato District Council in becoming a shareholder.
Through the chair, it's Western Bay District Council. Just as by way of a very brief background, Western Bay have actually approached Waikato LAS, now known as CoLab, to become a shareholder because it sees a lot of value in the projects that Waikato LAS are undertaking. So we run Waikato LAS on the basis of it's a collaboration of the willing. And for the $1 that it would cost Western Bay to become a shareholder, we actually benefit to the tune of about $20,000 in terms of their contribution towards the operating costs. So from my perspective, I believe it's sort of a relative no-brainer in terms of they are a very neighbouring council. They are very joined to us anyway in terms of their locality, and they'll form part of the Eastern Waikato block within the collaboration band, the Waikato LAS representation. So from my perspective, it seems like an obvious thing to do because there are only benefits in terms of reducing our own costs. And that they will add value in terms of perhaps progressing ideas that we may not have progressed because we hadn't thought of them. So always welcome to willing parties would be my view as just as a background suggestion. And so that is built into the resolution that's before you.
I'm happy to move it.
Thank you, Terry. Seconded Tony. Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you very much on that one. So 5.2, Chief Executive's report.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, continuation on the theme, lots of information on government reforms. They continue to be government reforms and will continue to be government reforms for probably another 3 or 4 years and will dominate our environment. So other than that, the financials are tracking as well as they possibly could in this wonderful COVID era that we're in. We built some of that proposed performance into our annual plan as we had a discussion the other day. So other than that, the report should be taken as read. It's pretty clear about the issues in there.
Thank you, Rob. I'm happy to move the report. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, John. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I just one if I can through the chair.
Yes, Terry.
Just the roading one, Waikato. I know that they've had a reduction in funds. Is that out to 3 years, Rob, or is that just a 1 year?
So that was a 3-year payment.
3 year. Thank you.
Actually, having raised that, I don't know if it's appropriate. I just wondered if people have given consideration to the fact that they're all of the mayors in the Hawke's Bay are opposing the 80-kilometre speed limit. I don't know whether this is appropriate to raise that at this time, but probably not actually. So you've mentioned Waikato, Terry, so I just thought I'd throw that in there. We'll move right along. We'll just any further discussion.
Can I just make a comment on what you said though?
Yes.
So the speed limit issue is well canvassed, and I don't personally support it either. But the issue with the speed limit is lives. So
that's right.
The commercial interest, if you're driving a truck, you're going to have 20% more trucks and 20% more fuel. So deliver the same amount of fuel if you reduce the speed limit by 20%. That's that discussion widely. But this thing's not about what it costs you to get a tin of baked beans from wherever they come from to wherever they're going to. It's about saving lives. Yeah. So that is the discussion you're up against.
Yeah. And as you're aware, Tony, because of all the good work that you've been doing as our transport spokesperson, is that you're very aware that statistics do not support speed as being the issue in terms of our roading fatalities. Is that correct?
That is totally correct. In fact, right. Speed is probably 5 or 7 on the list.
Martin.
And yeah, just a point of order, the faster you go, the more fuel you burn. So actually probably reducing the speed by 20% could reduce fuel consumption by 25%. So
well,
just putting that out there.
We love you for it, Martin, but the actual reasoning given by Waikato is incorrect. So they are saying that the road fatalities are due to speed. In actual fact, the majority are not nowadays. It's distraction mostly and driver incompetence. So anyway, look, I've been very naughty in raising this during the CE's report.
We're talking about the chief executive's report.
Yeah, agreed.
I know. My fault. My bad. So I apologise for that, Rob. So I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Sorry, Murray, did you want to?
Yeah, just as we were talking about roading and part of the reduced roading budget, I've had a number of discussions over Christmas. The ratepayer out there doesn't know that our local roading budget is now 2/3 of what we predicted in the long-term plan. They don't know, they don't yet understand in communities like Simpsons Beach, Waikato, that there is no subsidy for the next 3 years for a footpath in their area. Now, these are pretty strong messages that I think we should put bluntly out there, because we get blamed on a local level. Why aren't we getting our footpath? And I think then people realise that our footpath budget has been halved and our roading budget is now 2/3.
Yeah.
Through the chair, I agree with Murray. The communities are uninformed about many things, but we did put a lot of very strong messaging out at the time that the annual plan was signed off. Happy to sort of do that again. It went on a circle through the community boards at the same time, and we got quite a lot of feedback. through Facebook pages at the time, but again, people forget these things, so it certainly doesn't hurt to put reminders out now and again, and I would certainly recommend that as we sign off this year's annual plan, albeit I won't be here, a reminder about that Waka Kotahi reduced funding would also serve a purpose in terms of continuing to remind the community that whilst local government is responsible for a lot of things, it's not responsible for the government funding elements that we try to retain or obtain.
Thank you. Okay, so we're now moving on. We'll actually finish the this before morning tea. So we're moving on to members' reports. So on that basis, Murray.
No, nothing to report.
Tony.
For me, I just think there's an opportunity in regards to water, particularly in Mercury Bay. So probably had more people, particularly in Whitianga, this year than we've had for a number of years. And we had no restrictions. And I think it's worthy to commend the people, staff, who got the additional consent to have more water. But I do believe that people were more responsible with water as well. There wasn't quite the belligerence there was in other years. Solid waste raises its head, and I'm aware that the Mercury Bay transfer station is due to open in September this year. I haven't seen a consent. Well, I never see the consent, but I get concerns. But I note that there's a solid waste thing that Mo's going to do later on, and there may be some detail on that. But from a Mercury Bay point of view, I'm just keen to know exactly where we are with that, and it is on target, given that was something that we thought might have been open for Christmas. We've spoken about the regional transport in Hamilton on Monday the 21st, and its speed limits. I must note that the Kuatunu separate crossing, there is now a digital, I think it's probably solar panel, 2 displays coming into Blackjack Road and coming onto it. And I just go back again, the discussion we've already had around NZTA subsidy. What we've actually delivered in capital works since we started COVID, to have in the back of our minds when we start getting to annual plan time, there'll be an awful lot to think about. Because you're not, if we only deliver 40% of it, you ain't adding 40% onto the next year or the year after that. Something is either going to go, or you're going to have to go and port a whole lot of services to make it happen. So people's aspirations need to probably be kept pretty much under wraps, because we are not going to have the capacity to do half what we said. So that's it from me.
Sally.
Just in terms of emergency management, I sent out lots of information. There's a consultation pre a bill being written, so it's not a bill, it's not a submission on a bill. I've been involved in the regional one. It's now available if anyone wants to see it. Alan and his team are working on our one, which will mirror that a lot. And the deadline is the 11th, which must be the end of this week. And so just to know that that's another thing that's happening. And I note that Napier's looking at removing their sirens. I saw that in the paper, and I acknowledge that there's still activity on the other side about that, and interested in feedback, because on this side we haven't had that response. So I'm interested in people's feedback. Other than that, thanks for your support. As you know, my old mum died, which is in the order of things, and yeah, all's well.
Thank you, Sally. And can I say that after a lengthy discussion with Gary Towler, our emergency controller, so I'm really comfortable that that's going, that all our responses are being handled well. Be interested to see the final regional submission though before it goes. If you can just flick that round to the councillors, that would be great. But got every confidence in the work.
I think the other thing that's really good for me is that it's addressing people's responsibility and clarity around non-declaration emergencies, which is a lot of our work. And so I think that will be really useful to get that clear.
Thank you, Sally. Really appreciate it. Gary.
Well, I have some comments, but can you come back to me after the other members have made their comments, because it may be covered.
Okay, thank you. Martin?
Yeah, a few things. I went along to the Mercury Bay Area School last week, where they were turning on their solar project. That was very exciting. As some members might know, that I've got a bit of a thing about solar. Some would say obsession, but it's a healthy obsession. The other thing that is really concerning, and spoken to Bruce about it, was the homemade zebra crossing that appeared in Blackjack Road. And unfortunately, that's left council in a very difficult position, because if anyone uses it and someone gets run over, that's really going to be on the people who put it there. If council gets rid of it and then someone gets run over, council will get blamed. And Bruce has said, well, basically it's not in the right spot, because cars can come around the corner and you'll have cars knocking into each other. But yeah, it's just one of those situations where we're a bit damned if we do and damned if we don't. So I think that's going to be I guess some consultation with the community to just sort of try to explain it better, so that so that we don't look like the bad guys. Yes, and I think that's all I'll say at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Robin?
I really don't have a lot to say. Just I wanted to extend a thanks to the comms team for their work over the summer. It was nice to be able to switch off and know that anything important would come to me. And that was, I knew what I needed to know when I needed to know it, and without having to spend hours agonising about what I didn't know. So thank you, the comms team.
Well done. Thank you. Terry?
Yes, just a quick update. Wangata's had a very busy year with lots of people coming into the summer, non-resident ratepayers and visitors. They're all concerned about the drownings this year. The number seems to be pretty high, and there's been a lot of push around town to try and get people to go to the pool and get some training in that respect. We've had 3 concerts over the summer at Joe's Farm, and they've all gone very well. While the numbers have been low, I think they've been trying to make sure they do it right. There's been no issues there. And the police over summer reported things have been very quiet, so thanks to them. We've opened up a second water treatment plant in Whangamata, which is part of the water treatment program. And thanks go out to those contractors and staff who have worked on that. It's very professional, and it's an amazing piece of equipment when you see it going. So thank you very much to them. And there's a lot of discussion at the moment around solid waste contract and operation to the transfer station moving. And I just want to open that up as for a discussion coming forward in the next meetings and see where that goes. Thank you. Thank you, Terry. John?
Just a couple of things. Thanks, Sandra. First of all, it was nice to deal with Tairua today. It really was. That got quite unpleasant, and the water's got quite rough there. But with your guidance, Sandra and Ross, we've got through a place where we need to be, and we seem to be in a reasonably secure situation now, better than we were before. So thank you, Andrew, for that. Second one is Rob himself. This will be his final council meeting. I hope I'm not standing looking at Sandra, but this is a personal thing, Rob. I've developed great faith in your judgment and your ability to navigate through waters that I didn't think we would ever get through. And sometimes there's been a bit of pushing and shoving, but yeah, my faith in you is strong, and I wish you well with whatever you do.
Cool. Well done. Thank you. That's something that I didn't think about. Okay, so it just comes down to me. Oh no, Gary. Sorry, Gary, your turn.
Well, one of the things I am contacted about in my role as a councillor is the concern people have and your stance on anti-vaccination. You now have come out.
No, point of order, Gary, that I'm not anti-vaccination. I've had vaccinations, and only a couple of years ago, so not anti-vaccination, all right? Well, so, but don't presume to speak on in regard to my personal choices in regard to my health. And if you want to take up any matters of conduct, you need to refer that to the Audit and Risk Committee, not here in your members' report.
Does Gary get to finish his members' report?
if he's going to start
Just-
misrepresenting me, Martin, I have the right to challenge that.
I don't have a problem you having your personal opinion. I have a problem that you as mayor are out there promoting your personal opinion. And I find that I get contacted by so many ratepayers about this, and I'm sure the rest of us do. And you just seem to be unashamed about that.
As I said, Gary, if you have a concern over conduct, you take that matter up through the Audit and Risk Committee that is coming up on the 17th. And after 2.5 years, I'm sure you're aware that that is where those matters are raised. Otherwise, we can give you that briefing once again.
Can I just then refer to the audit and risk you're talking about? That was not council's decision to have it go to audit and risk. It was the chief executive's. Council can quite easily make the decision. In fact, it's more properly their role. For example, about this problem for you to not sign the declaration, you bought some time, and it was
point of order here. This is, if you've got a member's report representing your community as a councillor, then I'd like to hear it. And I'm sure that the councillors would like to hear it. But if this is just to attack my conduct, then I suggest you refer this matter to the audit and risk, or I'll do that for you. Happy to do that for you, Gary.
This is what I'm contacted about.
You should know what the proper process is.
This is what I'm contacted all the time by people who are ratepayers. And I don't think. Would you
like me to refer this matter to the Audit and Risk Committee?
No, quite frankly, you talked about the Audit and Risk Committee. Now, let me just make 2 comments, which I find quite extraordinary. We have an independent chair.
We're going to conclude the members' reports here.
Well, look, I think it's better I just tell them. This is
not a members' report.
You won't let me do it. I will tell the media directly.
I'll leave entirely up to your discretion, Gary, about how you choose to handle it. So now it'll be my members' report. I'd like to just ask Tony, in regard to the matters that you raised during your members' report, do you need some clarification from council about the support or otherwise for the speed limit being lowered to 80 km?
I'd be interested to know what the feeling around this room was.
Okay.
For me, I take on board what you said. The only thing that they'll produce is that if there is an accident involving motor vehicles, the faster you are going, the bigger the mess. I don't think for 1 minute that they'd say that is the main reason, but it's one of the things that they can control. They could do better by putting in median barriers and side barriers and better quality roads, but the cost of that is prohibitive. So I think the 80 kilometres an hour is an knee-jerk reaction. There simply isn't enough road policing to even to do that. You can drive 200 kilometres an hour in most of our roads and you get caught. And the emphasis of the distractions you talk about, 100% right. There are far more people crossing median strips. There are far more people on their cell phone. There are far more people with drugs before alcohol being involved. But I'd be interested to know when I go to that meeting whether around this table people think 80 is better than 100. But I'm able to represent the council view. And my own view is status quo.
Okay, so I'm happy for you to represent that view.
Do you want our view? I can say this as my view.
So which stretch of road are you talking about, Tony?
All roads in New Zealand, but it's all roads in the Waikato district.
So Koku Hikawai, for example, could be 80.
And so, unless they're engineered, so if you're coming down the new expressway,
it's 110.
It's 110 because the road has been designed for 110. But what they talk about is the small roads. So if you're going from here to Hamilton, going around Weedy or Hawhiti, and those roads, they'll all become 80. State highway, be 80 over the Koku Hikawai, be 80 everywhere.
Talking about the whole of Northwood becoming 80 km.
Through the chair, rather than having had ad hoc discussion as part of the members' report session, would it be more appropriate to have Wakakotahi in the room for the March council meeting or very close to the March council meeting so that you can actually have a rather more informed discussion about why they're doing it and then actually ask them questions and perhaps we as a staff will be able to put some of our own thoughts forward as well. It might help Tony a lot more.
And I think a representative from the Waikato Regional Transport Committee, there will be Mark Marahulis, here as well.
Yep.
To provide the data they've got. They've offered, and I believe they've actually made it.
So I think what we could do, rather than expose Waka Kotahi in a council meeting environment, let's do a workshop at the same time as the next council meeting. And perhaps it'll allow everybody to have a bit of a free and frank discussion about what we believe and what they may suggest is best. And then we can sort of come to a bit more of a conclusion as to how we can help Tony around that transport committee table.
And we can advocate for 50 at Kuranui Bay.
So I felt that was quite an important issue, and so that's why I raised this in my members' report. So I'm because it's quite topical at the moment, and I think it's important for us. But so I think we'll just leave the members' reports at that, and just remembering our assigned roles and functions. And so now we go into public excluded for the last part.
Move the members' reports.
Oh, sorry. Well done, Robin. Move,
Are we having
Robin.
a cup of tea?
Seconded, Martin. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against, carried. Look, we've only got one more item to deal with, and I think that will conclude the meeting for today.